Picture this: Constantinople, 1633. The streets are tense, silent, terrified, because the Sultan has issued a new decree, a law so strict, so brutal, that nobody dares to break it. Alcohol is now forbidden throughout the Ottoman Empire, completely banned. Taverns are shut down. Wine barrels are smashed. Anyone caught drinking? Executed. On the spot. No trial. No mercy. The Sultan's men patrol the streets at night. If they catch you with a bottle of wine, they throw you in the Bosphorus with stones tied to your feet. You drown. The empire is terrified. Nobody drinks. Nobody dares. And the man who created this law, the Sultan who turned the empire into a police state over alcohol, Sultan Murad IV. He was one of the most feared rulers in Ottoman history. Brutal, paranoid, ruthless. But here is the thing, he was also a massive hypocrite, because while his people were being executed for drinking, Murad was getting drunk in his palace every single night. And 8 years later, at age 28, he died, probably from alcohol-related illness. This is the story of the Sultan who made a law he could not follow and paid the ultimate price. But let us rewind, because Murad was not always a tyrant. He was born in 1612, the son of Sultan Ahmed I, and from the moment he was born, his life was marked by tragedy. When Murad was 7 years old, his father died, and the succession crisis began. His uncle, Mustafa I, became Sultan, but Mustafa was mentally unstable. They called him Mustafa the Mad. He was deposed after just 3 months. Then, Murad's older brother, Osman II, became Sultan at age 14. Osman tried to reform the empire, tried to challenge the Janissaries, the powerful military elite. Bad idea. The Janissaries revolted. They dragged Osman from the palace, and they murdered him. Crushed his testicles in a brutal execution designed to humiliate him. Murad was only 11 years old when he watched his brother being torn apart by an angry mob. And then they locked him up, the cafes, the cage, that golden prison where Ottoman princes were kept to prevent them from causing trouble. For 3 years, Murad lived in that cage, from age 11 to 14, locked in luxurious rooms. No freedom, no future, just waiting. Waiting to either become Sultan or be killed. Can you imagine? 3 years of your childhood, trapped, watching, knowing that any day they might come to execute you too. That is what shaped Murad. That is where his paranoia was born. That is where he learned that power meant survival, and weakness meant death. In 1623, the empire was collapsing. The Janissaries were out of control. The government was corrupt. They needed a strong sultan. So they turned to Murad, age 14. And Murad was ready. He had spent 3 years planning, thinking, preparing. He knew exactly what he had to do. Be ruthless. Be feared. Show no mercy. Within weeks of taking the throne, Murad started executing people. Anyone who had been involved in his brother Osman's murder. Anyone who threatened him. Anyone he did not trust. He personally attended executions. Sometimes he even carried them out himself. Historical accounts describe Murad strangling conspirators with his own hands. At age 14, the empire was shocked, but also relieved. Because finally they had a strong sultan, someone who could restore order, someone the Janissaries feared. And Murad did restore order, through terror. But Murad was not just brutal, he was also weirdly moralistic. he became obsessed with vice, with sin, with purifying the empire. In 1633, Murad issued his most infamous decree, the total ban on alcohol and tobacco. Why? Nobody knows for sure. Some historians say it was religious. Murad wanted to be seen as a pious Muslim sultan. Others say it was about control, about showing that he had absolute power over every aspect of people's lives. Either way, the law was brutal. Taverns were raided. Wine was poured into the streets. Coffee houses, yes, even coffee was suspicious, were shut down. And if you were caught? Execution, drowning, beheading, impalement. Murad would disguise himself and walk through the streets at night, looking for violators, and when he found them, he would kill them himself. Historical records mention Murad personally executing a group of women he caught drinking in a park. He beheaded them on the spot. The empire lived in terror. Nobody drank, nobody smoked, nobody dared. But here is the thing nobody talks about. Murad was doing all of this every night in his palace, because while Murad was executing people for drinking, he was drinking a lot. Palace records, the ones that survived, mention Murad hosting private drinking parties with his closest friends, his advisors, his favorites. They would get drunk, violently drunk. And Murad would sometimes get so intoxicated that he would rage, break things, attack servants. Foreign ambassadors wrote reports describing Murad as an alcoholic, a drunkard sultan who preached sobriety while destroying his body with wine. The hypocrisy was staggering. He executed hundreds, maybe thousands, of people for the exact thing he was doing every night. But nobody could say anything, because if you accused the Sultan of drinking, you would be the next one drowned in the Bosphorus. So everyone stayed silent. The empire knew, but nobody spoke. But Murad was not just a tyrant and a hypocrite, he was also actually competent. In 1638, he personally led the Ottoman army to recapture Baghdad from the Safavid Persians. It was a huge victory, a major military success. Murad fought alongside his soldiers. He was brave, skilled, a real warrior. For a brief moment, the empire loved him. He was not just a terrifying sultan, he was a conqueror, like the old days, like Suleiman the Magnificent. But the celebration did not last long, because Murad came back from the campaign different, sicker, weaker. The years of drinking were catching up to him. By 1640, Murad was clearly dying. He was only 28 years old, but he looked much older. His body was failing, his liver was destroyed. He had gout, constant pain. Some historians say it was cirrhosis from years of heavy drinking. Others say it might have been poison, or a combination of both. Either way, on February 8, 1640, Sultan Murad IV died. He was 28 years old. He had ruled for 17 years, and his death was quiet. No grand funeral, no mourning empire, just relief. The alcohol ban lifted immediately. Taverns reopened, people drank again. It was as if the empire exhaled. Finally, Murad's brother, Ibrahim, yes, Ibrahim the Mad, became sultan. And the empire descended into chaos again. So what do we make of Murad IV? Was he a strong sultan who saved the empire from collapse? Yes, absolutely. He restored order when everything was falling apart. Was he a brutal tyrant who executed people for crimes he committed himself? Also, yes. That is what makes his story so fascinating and so infuriating. Murad understood power. He knew that fear worked, that brutality could stabilize an empire. And for a while, it did work. But he could not control himself. He made laws he could not follow. He preached purity while drowning in vice. And in the end, his hypocrisy killed him. He died at 28, destroyed by the very thing he had forbidden his people to touch. There is a tragic irony in that. A man who had absolute power over millions, but no power over himself. Today, Murad IV is remembered as one of the most brutal sultans in Ottoman history, but also one of the most effective. He saved the empire, temporarily, through sheer force of will and terror, but he also showed the limits of tyranny. You can control people with fear. You can ban whatever you want. You can execute anyone who disobeys. But you cannot escape yourself. Murad banned alcohol because he knew how destructive it was. He saw what it did to people, to empires, to order. And yet, he could not stop drinking. That is the real tragedy. Not that he was a hypocrite, but that he knew he was a hypocrite. And he did it anyway. If this story of power, hypocrisy, and self-destruction moved you, if you are sitting there thinking about the rules we make and the rules we break, hit that like button. Because history is not just about the great rulers and their achievements. It is also about their failures, their contradictions, the ways they destroyed themselves while trying to save everyone else. And Murad IV is one of the most perfect examples of that contradiction. We are uncovering all these stories. The hypocrites, the tragic heroes, the rulers who could conquer empires, but not themselves. So if you want more content that makes you rethink everything you thought you knew about power and control, subscribe and hit that notification bell. Drop a comment. Was Murad a hero or a hypocrite? Can you be both? What would you have done in his position? Thanks for watching. And remember, the hardest person to rule is always yourself.